Hey everybody, welcome back to the Dungeon Dive. Daniel here. Alright, I am here today with a look at Lord Dunsany's The Gods of Pegana, which is the next book in the Dungeon Dive book club. And I am reading from the Beyond the Fields We Know collection from the Ballantine Adult Fantasy series, which was created by Lynn Carter. Lynn Carter's role in introducing a very large group of readers to a lot of classic and underrated fantasy in a post-Tolkien world cannot be overstated. His work on the Ballantine Adult Fantasy series is masterful. And one of the best things about these collections are Lynn Carter's introductions. And in each book, he does like a history. You get to know about the author. You get to know about the work that you're going to be reading and kind of its place in the general field of fantasy fiction. And he was just a great archivist, I guess you could say, of fantasy literature. And a lot of it just was, up until this point, they started publishing these, and I believe it was like in the 70s, I think they were. Yeah, so this was 1972. I believe the Ballantine Adult Fantasy series ran from like the late 60s into the early 70s. But up until that point, a lot of this stuff was really out of print and hard to find. And Lynn Carter and Ballantine books, their praise cannot be sung enough for what they did for the fantasy world. So The Gods of Pegana is a really interesting collection of short myths and fables and tales. It is very much a work of what I would call cosmological fiction, where it is less concerned about the creating a story, creating a narrative, or telling a story, creating a narrative with characters and a plot, and is far more concerned with just creating an entire universe or world. Kind of think of the Silmarillion or the Genesis in the Christian Bible. These are works of cosmological fiction, creation stories. All of the world's religions have these very elaborate and ornate and pretty wonderfully written creation stories, and The Gods of Pegana is a creation story. And not only did Dunsany create his world, but he would go on to inspire authors like Lovecraft and Clark Ashton Smith and all of those guys to create their own worlds. The main god that Dunsany creates in this book, his name Mana Yud Sushai, and it is very much the basis for Azathoth in Lovecraftian mythos, in the Cthulhu mythos. And so what we learn about Mana Yud Sushai is that he was like the main god, and he created a bunch of little gods. And he was put kind of to sleep by this drummer named Sarl. And as long as Sarl plays his cosmic drum, then Mana Yud Sushai will stay asleep. And as long as it is asleep, Skarl is the drummer. Skarl, not Sarl. Skarl. As long as Mana Yud Sushai is asleep, then the other gods can go on creating the universe and the planets and all of their inhabitants. But if Skarl the drummer ever ceases to drum, then Mana Yud Sushai will awaken and everything will be destroyed. And through these short fables, most of these and myths, most of these are like, some of them are only a paragraph long. I think the longest is 3 or 4 pages. But we learn about the different gods, we learn about their followers, their prophets, and through the acts of the gods and through the tales, we learn about the people that inhabit this world. The language that Dunsany uses he was inspired by the King James English version of the Bible. And so the language is very poetic, it's lyrical. It can be a little difficult to penetrate. You have to read pretty slowly to really get it. It's kind of like, like reading Shakespeare or something. And Dunsany, he liked writing in this lyrical fashion, and I believe that this is one of his better works in this style. Here's an example of Yoharneth Lahai, the god of little dreams and fancies. Yoharneth Lahai is the god of little dreams and fancies. All night he sendeth little dreams out to Pegana to please the people of earth. He sendeth little dreams to the poor man and to the king. He is so busy to send his dreams to all before the night be ended, that oft he forgetteth which be the poor man and which be the king. To whom Yoharneth Lahai cometh not with little dreams and sleep, he must endure all night the laughter of the gods with highest mockery in Pegana. All night long Yoharneth Lahai giveth peace to cities until the dawn hour of the departing of Yoharneth Lahai, when it is time for the gods to play with men again. Whether the dreams of the fancies of Yoharneth Lahai be false, and the things that are done in the day be real, or the things that are done in the day be false, and the dreams and the fancies of Yoharneth Lahai be true, none knoweth, saving only Mana Yud Shuhai, who have not spoken. So you can see the example there. You kind of have to read slower. You're not going to plow through, even though it's only about 80 pages long in most editions. It is a careful read. It's a careful study. And the joy of reading Dunsany, especially in the Lords of Pegana, is in absorbing his language, absorbing his prose, his style. It is in studying the way he uses words and the lyrical way and the poetic way that he structures his writing is really the joy of reading, that you feel like, it was written in, I think first published, I believe, in 1905, but it feels like you're reading something from antiquity. He wrote in this affected style that made it seem even older than it is today. And you're it almost feels like you are reading a religious text, and I think that's why it's such an interesting work of fiction and really unlike anything that we really read today, and I think that's why it's so interesting. So that's it. There's not really a lot to say because there's not really a plot. He's not dealing with, there's not dramatic tension really. It's more about a feeling. It's a tone poem, you could say. It makes you feel something that a piece of art might make you feel, and everybody's going to take away their own little subjective feeling on the gods of Pegana, and that's why I think it's interesting. I don't know if you can't really wrap your hands around something tangible. It's more of like an ephemeral feeling that this book provides. But we will be discussing this book I'm going to set up a time. I think it's going to be Friday, September 25th. We'll schedule from 6 to 7 p.m. Last time we went a little over and it was super fun. We had a couple people join us. So hopefully you can join us in discussing Lord Dunsany's The Gods of Pegana. And that's going to be it for today. So we'll talk to you guys later. Bye-bye.